Hello and welcome to the lecture on how to define methods with parameters. So let's create a real life example of a class with some real life example of how do you create a method and with parameters. For this we're going to do a file operation here. So you should know how to access a file, how to read a file and basic operations with the file. And if you're not aware of it, you can take the free course where we deep dive into how to work with files. So I hope you have done that exercise and you know how to work with files, because here we're going to just look at the oops concept and we're not going to discuss about how to work with files. We're going to look at how to define that specific program in terms of oops concept. Okay, so I've created a files.php. Let's define a class called files. Let's define a method of a files class, and the operation of that file class will be to display a content. Okay, and the return type is boolean, and you're passing some variable to it that could be a file name. Okay, so we'll write the code here on how to display the content based on the file name, and you will understand how the class can be reused. Right, you pass in different file names, it just print out different files. Okay, and you'll understand how to create a class, how to access those methods via the object, how to create an object, and how to pass values to that methods. Okay, so I'm going to quickly write the code here how to display the content, and then we're going to start creating the objects. So we have created a method called display content, which has a variable called result, which is true or false. If there's some problem in reading the file, you make it false and you return it. Okay, if everything is successful, it will print the content of that file. Okay, the method is called file get content, store it in a variable, and we'll print that variable. Okay, and it will return as a boolean variable. So let's define an object for this class. We'll say files1 is equal to new files. This is how you basically create the object of a class, and using this object you can call the method of that class. Okay, the method is called as display content. Now we'll pass in the file name. You'll say test.txt, and let's create this file. Okay, let's save this file. So the file is created and it will call this method. You can call this files and you can see the content of the file here now. Right, you can see the file name and you can see the content of the file. The most beautiful thing about OOP is the reusability and the modularity of the code. That's what we discussed when we discussed about OOPs basic. So let's look a very good example of OOPs that brings reusability to your code. Okay, a perfect example is just like this. Right, you can choose to have one more file name, or you can choose to have another instance of it trying to read another file. Okay, you're not changing the actual code. Remember, you have just defined the class, you have the specification ready. Now you're just printing the objects. Right, like how they create the cars in the real world, they have a machine that is pre-coded with the specification. The machine just operate and just print out the objects, and that objects are basically cars. So it's the same concept. You have your specification already feeding, right? Now you are just printing the objects. That's basically the beauty of OOPS, wherein it brings the reusability to your code, right? And n number of times you can just use the same specification and you get the same output that is defined as per the specification. Okay, so for that you can create one more file called test1, and then you can get to display that content twice. Okay, so that's the beauty of writing in OOPS, wherein your code is being organized into classes, and then you create an instance of a class and then access the methods of a class via the instance, and then you can reuse your code as many times you want. So means the object can be created unlimited times. Okay, so this is how basically you can pass a parameter to a method inside the class, and this is how the OOPS brings reusability to your code as well. Okay, so that's all on this lecture on how to define methods with parameters, and I'll see you in the next one.